Psalms 27. As you're turning there, we are taping this especially for Nancy Bryant because she was the one who asked this question, and she does have graduation this evening. But we're going to do a two-parter here on what we'll call the Predicament of Petra. And maybe I might have a study outline to give you a study guide for next time. But for right now, we're just going to introduce this subject and look at her question and begin the process of answering it. Now, the first thing we need to do is look at a fact. Fact one is, some of the believing remnant of Israel have a certain hiding place, and it's shown us in the Bible for the tribulation period. This hiding place is known as Petra. We can prove that by going to Psalms 27 and verse number 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, come upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Now, this is a part of what is going to happen with God as He allows the enemies of the remnant to be tripped up, trapped, as they begin looking toward eliminating this Jewish remnant in Petra. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. Now, this is a reference to the book of Daniel, where it says that Antichrist makes war with the saints. Now, here is a misconception. We dealt with this past Sunday. The misconception is this, that Antichrist wants to kill off all the Jews on this planet. That is absolutely not true. He wants all the Jews on this planet to be incorporated into his kingdom because he thinks he's the Jewish Messiah. And he wants them to worship him and have a counterfeit kingdom. Who he wants to war with, and it's specified in all of these verses, are the saints, that is, the believing Jews, those of the remnant. So, if we come down to verse number 5, for in the time of trouble, this is a reference to the tribulation, he, God, shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. And here's where he's going to hide. In Petra, he shall set me upon a rock. And that rock there is a reference to Petra, and we'll see this in some other portions of Scripture if you'll turn to Isaiah 16. Isaiah chapter 16. And verse number 1. Send ye the lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah. Now, the word Selah there is an ancient word for Petra. It's synonymous. It's one and the same thing. There's absolutely no difference. And if you'll note, from Selah to the wilderness, that's the area round about Petra, unto the mount of the daughter of Zion. For it shall be that as a wandering bird cast out the nest, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon, to take counsel, execute judgment, and so forth. Now, if you'll come to the middle part of verse 3, it says, regarding those of Moab, at the area of Moab, hide the outcasts, bewray not him that wanders. Now, this is a reference to the remnant that flees at the presence of Antichrist. And they're headed toward Moab and Ammon, and especially Edom, because that's where Petra and the area of Petra is located. That's where they go for protection. So it says, hide the outcast. Verse 4, let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert or a cover to them from the face of the spoiler. The spoiler is, according to Daniel 11, Antichrist. He spoils the remnant. He takes their property. He takes their families. Sometimes he takes all of their money. He prevents them from doing anything in buying or selling with the mark. And that's why it's called the spoiler and the extortioner. His days are going to come to an end, but until that time, they are going to need covering. Come to chapter 42, the very same book, Isaiah 42. And verse number 11. Let the wilderness and the cities thereof lift up their voice. Now, the wilderness is where Petra is located. As we will see, Petra is a wilderness. The villages of Kedar doth inhabit. Note this phrase. Let the inhabitants of the rock sing. So they're going to be placed upon a rock when the Lord comes and brings them out. But until that time, they're hidden in a rock, and God calls them the inhabitants, the dwellers within the rock, or Petra. Let them shout from the top of the mountains when the glory of the Lord comes, because verse 13, the Lord is going to go forth as a mighty man. He will stir up jealousy like a man of war. He shall cry and roar. He shall prevail against his enemies. That's the battle of Armageddon, and he destroys those soldiers that are in that area. As a matter of fact, all along the Jordan Rift Valley, from Basra south, through the east of the valley of Kidron, all the way north to Megiddo. So this is a fact. We know that God has this place for the Jewish remnant. Okay. Fact 2. Let's go to Psalms 60. We know that Petra's location is revealed in the Bible, and that this is where God is going to take this group of people. So we're in Psalms 60 here. Go to verse number 9. Who will bring me into the strong city? Now, we have seen the videos here, both from the radio Bible class and from the Southwest Radio Church, and it showed the city of Petra. And it's called a strong city because it's surrounded by rocks and mountains. And the inhabitants were cave dwellers. They dwelt in the rocks, and very thick stones protected them. And so it says, who will bring me into the strong city? And the answer to that is God. God is going to lead them there. Who will lead me into Edom? Wilt not thou, O God, which has cast us off? Up until this time, God was not for Israel. God reinstitutes his program with the nation after the rapture. And the believing remnant will be protected and helped. So, God, you did not go out with our armies, but you're going to give us help from trouble now, says verse 11. For vain is the help of man. Why does he say that? Well, number one, most people cannot be depended upon in such clutch situations as this, where it might mean their life and their welfare, and that of their families, and taking a stand for such a group. But in this particular case, they can't go to other men. Why? Because by the time you get to the end of the tribulation period, except for the small remnant of people, every other person on this planet has the mark of the beast, and they are your enemies. You can't ask them for help. It's too late. So, verse number 12, through God we shall do valiantly, for he it is that shall tread down our enemies. All right, let's go back then to Revelation 12. And there will be some overlap in looking at some of these verses, because we'll pick up words and concepts from them as we go along. And we'll look at verse 6 and then verse 14. And the woman fled to the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God. That's the whole point. They're going to know exactly where to go, where God is going to feed them, give them water, give them shelter, see them through this particular time. And as a matter of fact, if you look at verse number 14, it says, to the woman were given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness. And note these three words here, unto her place. So it is a definite geographical location. It is going to be known of the remnant. But the fact of the matter is, and that's the question, if we know it, if the remnant knows it, if it's in the Bible, how come Antichrist won't know it? Well, the fact of the matter is, he will know it. He's not dumb. He's a genius. He can read these things, and he knows exactly where they're going to be. And you say, well, now, Pastor, wait one second. If he knows, how in the world, then, are they going to escape from his clutches, his grasp? They're going to go to this place, which is 120 miles from Jerusalem, or thereabouts, give or take. They're going to get to this place, and they're going to be there for 3.5 years, and he can't get them. Why is that? How could we explain that? Seems inconsistent. Well, let's start with some reasons. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 7. Why will Antichrist know where they are and yet be unable to get most of the remnant? Now, some of them will be captured. Some of them will be killed. The first reason here, as we're developing these things, is that although Antichrist is given some supernatural powers by the devil himself, he is still just a man, and he's subject to the limitations of reality. Now let's look at this in verse number 8 of Daniel 7. I considered the horns. Now these are the 10 core nations and kings of Antichrist's coming kingdom in Western Europe. And behold, there came up among them another little horn. Now, if the horns are kings or men, the little horn is also a man. Now, there is nothing special about him except that he sells his soul to the devil and gets powers that are extra natural. But he is still a man, and is subject to limitations. Note the last part. Behold, in this horn were eyes like that of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And the reason is he is given powers by the devil, as we'll see in a moment. Let's go to verse number 19. I would know the truth of the fourth beast. The fourth beast is the revived and revised Roman Empire seen in Western Europe, and it's a kingdom of men who will be destroyed, men who will be terminated at the coming of the Lord. It's different from all the other kingdoms. It's powerful, and it devours and stamps in pieces. And he wants to know the 10 horns, what these horns were, who they were. But he especially, last part of verse 20, wanted to know that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout, and note this, than his fellows. And that's the point. Antichrist is only a man. And just like you and I can only be at one place at one time, we can't flit around here and fly. We can't read people's minds. We can't do this and the other. We're subject to limitations. He is too, even though he has these great powers. And it was this horn then, verse 21, the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Yes, it doesn't look good there for a while, but the remnant is still going to be saved. The remnant is going to be preserved. All right? So then he tells us in verse number 23, The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms. And note this last part, and shall devour the whole earth. Now we're going to stop right there and consider something that is misunderstood. Because people do not study the history of the tribulation period. They think that Antichrist comes to power, and because of verses just like this, that he immediately controls the earth. That is absolutely not true. Antichrist himself has trouble getting the power over the whole earth until the final few days, as it were, of the tribulation period. For 7 years, he has control of large parts of the earth. He has control of many nations, but he has trouble until the end. He does not succeed in uniting the earth until the end. He will eventually devour it. Yes, that's true, except for the remnant. But he doesn't succeed until the end. Now, that's very important, because if Antichrist succeeds right at the start, what about the 144,000? Who do the two witnesses witness to? Who do you take the Great Commission to? Everybody in the world at this point, the start of the tribulation, has the mark of the beast. How do you have then a remnant? Why do you wait 3.5 years before the remnant flees from Antichrist if everybody is controlled by Antichrist? The mark of the beast is not a universal mark, and the world is not fully united under Antichrist until almost 7 years later. Then he devours the earth. Up until that time, he does not. So note verse 24. I stress that because people are it's really fuzzy on that point. The 10 horns shall be out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And another shall arise after them. They're in place, and here comes Antichrist. Drop down to verse 25. He shall speak great words against the Most High and wear out the saints. He's going to think to change times and laws, and they shall be given to his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Now, we'll be there in just a little bit and back at that verse. But let's go to chapter 8 now. The point we're making here is Antichrist will have powers, but Antichrist is just a man. And just as Lucifer has limited powers, this man has less than Lucifer. Daniel chapter 8, verse number 24. His power shall be mighty, and this is a reference to the king that shall come. In the latter time. His power shall be mighty, and verse 23 tells us that, but not by his own power. So, in and of himself, as a man, he is a genius, and he understands a lot of things. But he has a power outside of himself that enables him to go beyond the bounds of mortal men. He's Superman as such. But he is not indestructible, and he is not a Superman in that he has limitations. He shall destroy wonderfully and shall prosper and practice and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. And we talked Sunday as to how this could happen. Taking the mark of the beast is destroying Israel without destroying Israel. It is keeping the nation intact and the population intact and the government intact and feeding everybody and clothing everybody, and everybody's got a job and everybody's happy in the kingdom of Antichrist because they take the mark of the beast. Well then, Pastor, how does he destroy them? The minute you take the mark of the beast, you can't be saved. The minute you take the mark of the beast, you're a walking zombie. You're headed for the lake of fire. That's how he destroys wonderfully. So magnificent. It is a genius plan to get people to feel good about taking the mark. And when they do, he has trapped them. So it goes on to say here what his policies will be. And the reason that we know that he is limited, he stands up against the Prince of Princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Antichrist will be destroyed. He can be destroyed. He is just a man. All right, let's look at a couple other places that give us this information. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And it says, starting with verse 8, and then, this referring to after the rapture, after we're gathered together to him, the church, shall that wicked one be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. He as a man will wind up in the lake of fire. But Paul notes then that although Antichrist is a man, he is special in the sense that he is given some supernatural powers. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth to be saved. And for this cause God sends them strong delusion that they should believe. And in the Greek it has a definite article, that they should believe the lie. What is the lie? That Antichrist is Jesus Christ. And most believe that he is because of these supernatural powers that he has. Okay, let's come to Revelation chapter 13. Revelation 13, and we'll start with verse number 2. Now, the point that we're making here is that Antichrist is still just a man, even though he has great powers. Verse 2 says, and the beast which I saw was like a leopard and a bear and a lion. But the last part says, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And verse number 4, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, who is able to liken to the beast, who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him, verse 5, a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power to continue. Verse 6, he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those that dwell in heaven. And then verse 7, it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So he does have special abilities, some supernatural powers, but still he is a man. Now let's go back to Daniel and look at reason number 2. Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. And the second reason is this. Antichrist, just like us, is limited to time. He only has 7 years to accomplish his objective. Now, what is his objective? Number 1, to rule the world. Number 2, to amalgamate all unbelieving Jews into his kingdom, thus disqualifying them for the salvation and the kingdom of Christ to come. And number 3, to annihilate the remnant of believing Jews. So this trilateral objective that he has here. Finally, to get all the world to enter into an agreement with him as their king, to amalgamate all Jews into that kingdom, and then to eliminate believing Jews from this planet. Now, how do we know that he just has 7 years? Daniel chapter 9 and verse number 27. And he, Antichrist, or is referred to as the prince that shall come in verse 26, shall confirm the covenant with many Jews, the nation per se. And the reason it uses many here is because it's not all the Jews. Many of the Jews make this covenant with him, but it's not all the Jews. Why isn't it all the Jews? You've got two witnesses that come down and give information about Antichrist, what he's doing. You have the book of Daniel, which many of the Jews will read and see and believe and know what's going on. You'll have the sealing of 144,000 Jewish witnesses that will testify concerning these things for the first 3.5 years. You'll have other believing Jews filled with the Spirit taking the Great Commission to the world. And so many of the Jews in the nation will make this covenant, but not all of them. There is a believing remnant. All right, and how long then does he make this covenant? What's the extent of it? He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Now again, we understand that a week here means times 7. 70 times 7 is 490 years. And if you have 1 7, it is a 7-year period that we're talking about here. So when he comes to power in signing that peace pact, he himself now is limited to 7 years to get all of this done. All right. Now, well, how does he do this? Go to the book of Revelation, chapter 2. Book of Revelation, chapter 2. It's chapter 6. My own notes here, I'm dyslexic. 2:6 instead of 6:2. It's 6:2 that we want. Here we have the opening of the first seal of the 7-seal book. Jesus Christ opens it, and with that seal broken, verse number 2 says, "And I saw, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him." And note this, and he. Now the he here is a reference to Antichrist. Jesus Christ sits on a white horse at the end of the tribulation period. Antichrist sits on the white horse at the beginning of the tribulation period. Jesus Christ comes back to make war with his enemies to start the kingdom. Antichrist begins the process of having a global kingdom by sitting on this white horse, and he goes forth to conquer. That's the point. He doesn't have the world when he is first revealed. What he has to do is conquer the world. And so that is what he immediately begins to do as he is revealed with the opening of this seal. Now, it's proven to us, if you go to Matthew chapter 24, that this is the case. Matthew 24. Because the Lord Jesus Christ said this. He was answering a question, "What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" Verse number 3. And so he said, "Take heed that no one deceive you." Verse 4. Now 5. "Many shall come in my name and say, I am the Messiah," shall deceive many. You remember John said in 1 John, "Many antichrists will come, but then the Antichrist will come." There are several pretenders. They got the Napoleonic syndrome. They want to be the Messiah. But there's one Antichrist, singular, that will come, and he'll be the real thing. But now, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. "See that you be not troubled. All these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." See, here's the point. He is revealed here at the beginning. He goes forth conquering and to conquer. There are wars and rumors of wars because he is beginning to absorb the nations round about him, making them satellites, making them part of his overall kingdom. But Christ says the end, meaning the end of the world, or literally aeon, the end of the age is not yet. The end of the age won't be, in verse 14, "This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world," cosmos, "for a witness unto all nations, and then the end of the age, the dispensation of law, shall come." So he says the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines, pestilences, earthquakes. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Now, why is that significant? Because the beginning of sorrows is the technical term for the first 3.5 years. Great tribulation is the technical term for the last 3.5 years. If Antichrist has all of the world when he first comes to power, why does he have to conquer it? Why are there wars and rumors of wars? Why doesn't he just bring in global peace immediately upon being recognized as the Messiah? It's because the truth of the matter is he must earn it. He conquers. These are the beginning of sorrows. First 3.5 years, last 3.5 years, verse 21. For then, from the midst of the week when Antichrist is revealed, it's called the abomination of desolation in verse 15. For then, and from that time to the end, shall be great tribulation. So, through all of this, Antichrist is making war on the earth. He talks peace out of one side of his mouth, but it's war on the other side. And he begins the process of conquering. All right. Now let's go to, while we're here, chapter 24 of Matthew. Note again from verse 15 and verse 21, and this is reason number 3. Antichrist has a second time limitation given to him as to why he has trouble getting all the remnant. He has 7 years to achieve all that he wants to, but as far as the remnant is concerned, he only has 3.5 years to do it. Now, how do we know that? Verse 15. And when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel stand in the holy place, if you read it, understand. Now, what did Daniel 9:7 say? He made a covenant for 7 years, but in the middle part of that, 3.5 years in, he stops temple service and declares himself God by setting himself there. And that's what Paul says in 2 Thessalonians. So, from that point, verse 16, at the start of the 3.5 years, when you see it, then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. If you're on the housetop, don't go down in the house to get anything. Don't return back, verse 18, to get your clothes. If you're with child, you're in great difficulty in those days. If it's winter, it's great difficulty. Why? Because there shall be great tribulation such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. So the first time limitation is 7 years. The second time limitation for the remnant specifically is 3.5 years. So as far as eliminating the remnant, he has 3.5 years to do it. Now we're still not done with this. Let's go back to while we're here in the so-called New Testament, let's go to Revelation 13, and then we'll go back to Daniel. Revelation 13. He cannot begin the process of annihilating the Jewish remnant until 3.5 years into the 7-year period. And we just learned that. Jesus said at this point, flee. So, note verse number 5 in Revelation 13. There was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given him to continue 40 and 2 months. 40 and 2 Jewish months of 30 days are 3.5 of their lunar years. And the prophecy entails lunar years. All right, let's go back to Daniel 7. Daniel 7 again. So even though he knows where they're going, they don't even start going there until the midst part of the week. So he can do nothing up until this point because he really has no basic power in Israel until the middle part. And then there are some other contingency factors we will consider that he has to deal with in order to try to get this Jewish remnant. But now the point that we're making is that he has a second time factor, and that is only 3.5 years. Daniel 7 and verse number 21. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against him. When did he declare war with the believing remnant of Israel, these saints? The middle part of the week, verse 25. He's going to think to wear out the saints, to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time, 1 year, times 2 years, making 3, and a dividing of time, half. 3.5 years. So he really doesn't get to focus in on the Jewish remnant fleeing to Petra until the start of this second 3.5 year period. All right. Now, even then, let's go back to Matthew 24. Now, I do apologize for going back and forth, but in order to get these points and to document these points, each and every one, we're going to have to go to some things that will overlap. Now, we're back to Matthew chapter 24 and a fourth reason. And that is, God now, from here to the end, does some intervention of his own. Now, the first inkling of this is told us by Christ himself. Verse 21 says, for then shall be great tribulation. Verse 22, and except those days, the days of the great tribulation. In other words, between the middle part of the week and the end, between the two parameters of the 3.5 years, the last 3.5 of the tribulation, except those particular days be shortened. There should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, that's the believing Jewish remnant, those days shall be shortened. Now, you got to ask yourself the question. Since there is a literalness about the 7 years, you can't make it less than 7 years as far as the tribulation is concerned. Since it talks about 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation, and even to the point of months and a specific amount of days, God cannot shorten the 24-hour periods and make them less in number. We say, Pastor, how can they be shortened and yet not shortened? By understanding what the word shortened means. It is the Greek word koloboo, and it means to curtail inactivity. So you turn to Revelation chapter 16. God limits his ability to persecute the Jews during that time, while keeping the literal specific years, days, and months intact. How does he do this? Revelation chapter 16. We'll start with verse number 1. This is part of the reason for the vial judgments. I heard a great voice out of the temple saying to the 7 angels, go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth. And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth. And there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. Okay, if you've got a plague on you, and you're itching and scratching and you don't feel good and you can't wander far from home or the hospital, and you are sick, you're not up to traipsing through the wilderness and the hot desert to find some Jewish remnant out there. God is curtailing his activities. He's limiting what he can do during this 3.5 year period. Now, it's not said how many days or months that he shortens his activity, but this is how he does it. The second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became blood, the blood of the dead, as the blood of a dead man. Every living thing in the sea died. Poured it upon the rivers, they became blood. And the voice said, verse 5, "You are righteous to do this, O Lord, because you have thus judged. They have shed the blood of saints and prophets. Thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy." So here you've got another judgment, the sea, and the things in the sea die. Then you've got another judgment. Temporarily, their water supply is cut off, like he did with Egypt. He made it blood. They couldn't drink it for a while. So these people are getting decimated. They're getting weakened. They're getting physically drawn down, and they're incapable of searching after the remnant. Verse number 8. "And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun. Power was given unto him to scorch men with fire." Now, here you are in the wilderness already, where it's 100 degrees in the shade. Now it's exceeding that, and you can't go looking for people. The men were scorched with great heat and blasphemed the name of God, which had the power of these plagues. Yet they repented not to give him glory. Now, here, especially in verse number 10, is one of the things that prevents him from finding the remnant. The fifth angel, the fifth vial judgment, poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast. Now, question, where is the throne of the beast? In the middle part of the week, he set himself up so that he, as God, sits in the throne of God, in the temple of God, declaring himself that he is God and the Jewish Messiah. From this point onward, the throne is in Jerusalem and in the surrounding area. Now, why is that significant? Because that's where the mass of soldiers of Antichrist are located. So note what it says. He pours upon the seat of the beast and then also upon his kingdom. It was full of darkness. And this is the Greek word which means it's a darkness that absorbs light. It's a darkness where you can hardly see your hand in front of your face because it takes in all of the light and doesn't let it escape. It's like one of those black holes where light itself is captured and extinguished. And they gnawed their tongues for pain, and they blasphemed the God of heaven because of the pains and the sores, but still repented not of their deeds. Just as soon as this stopped, during this period of time, they started back searching for the remnant. But that's the explanation of how these days can be shortened and still be the literal number of years and months and days. All right. We're just about out of time here. Let's go back to Daniel 11 and at least introduce the fifth reason. Now, the fifth reason is this. He doesn't even have the capacity to commit large amounts of soldiers to this process of finding the Jewish remnant until the end of the tribulation period. By then, it's well nigh too late. But up until this point, he begins to conquer, and finally he comes down to the middle part, and he comes into Israel itself. But even then, he only starts off with a small amount of soldiers. So Daniel 11, verse number 22. Last part of the verse brings us back to Daniel 9, 27, the prince that shall come, or the prince of the covenant. After the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. For he shall come up and shall become strong, now note, with a small people. He doesn't have large armies at first. He gives them the promise of large armies. But during this first 3.5 years, he moves his headquarters to Megiddo, and there's still just a small force there, comparatively speaking. A small force to what he's going to need during these last 3.5 years. So he cannot commit large amounts of soldiers to finding them because of some problems he's going to experience just shortly. But it says, he shall become strong with a small people. He shall enter peaceably into Israel, the land, even into the fattest places, that's Megiddo, the province. And then he begins to do his thing there with regard to the nation of Israel. And what we're going to have to do now is stop, and we have a moment. Is there a question on what we've covered? Okay, then let me just summarize, and we're done. The Bible reveals it. Everybody's going to know it. Antichrist is going to know it. Why doesn't he get the remnant? Number one, because though he has all these abilities, he's still a man and he's limited. Number two, he has a time limitation. He only has 7 years to accomplish global dominance, incorporating every Jew into his kingdom and eliminating the remnant. Number three, he has then a second time limitation, and that is just 3.5 years of the overall 7 in order to destroy the remnant.